All right, well, after 3 Lions primetime games in 4 weeks, this is actually our last one until week 17. Meanwhile, Dallas is going to be right back here again next week for their game against Minnesota. But thankfully, I actually already know what their representative for that matchup is going to be. Enough looking ahead to the future, though. Let's get back to the present with Dallas's representative this week, the Texas Tea. As you may have guessed from the name, the Texas Tea is a variant of the Long Island iced tea, and it's a very simple variant at that. It's just your standard Long Island spec with bourbon added to the already lengthy list of spirits that go into making a Long Island. In case you're unfamiliar with Long Islands, that means that this drink is white rum, tequila, gin, vodka, bourbon, simple syrup, lemon juice, and a splash of cola at the end. Now, it's pretty obvious why the Texas Tea has bourbon added to it. Bourbon, after all, is a spirit synonymous with the South. But why single out Texas specifically? The answer to that question actually lies in the drink's origin as a TGI Fridays creation. That's right, in 1980, to celebrate the chain's 40th anniversary, they made a series of Long Island variants, one of which was the Texas Tea. Cocktail historian Nico Martini, excellent name for a cocktail historian, by the way, identified this label as more of a marketing strategy than anything else. You know, Texas has a distinct vibe to it, a certain mystique, even if the actual whiskey or bourbon in the drink comes from Kentucky or Tennessee. Now, Detroit's representative this week also has a little bit of a questionable connection to the team. It's the Lion's Tail. The Lion's Tail is a Prohibition-era cocktail, first appearing across the pond in London in 1937, and as a result, the drink almost certainly has no connection to Lions football, and is instead a play on the saying, twisting the lion's tail, which essentially means to piss off the British. The drink itself is also very interesting. It's essentially a bourbon sour with allspice dram and bitters added to it, giving it a sort of tiki-like vibe. The popularity of the drink has also followed the general trends of tiki, falling off with the decline of tiki's popularity in the 70s and 80s, before returning to prominence in our modern cocktail renaissance. So bourbon was definitely the unifying factor in this mashup. I definitely leaned a little bit more towards the Lion's Tail because I wanted to do this as a traditional cocktail and not as a highball, but I think we've worked in a good amount of the Texas Tea into this as well. So the end result is a split base cocktail with a final spec of 1 ounce of our bourbon. Finally gonna kill the Buffalo Trace, I think. Let's see. So just barely over 1 ounce, I'll kill that off screen. 1 ounce of our tequila, using a Reposado tequila for this. Obviously a Texas Tea, you would be using a Blanco tequila because it would be one of the white spirits in that sort of Long Island formula. But actually, one, I don't know if I actually have any Blanco tequila. I may have finished that bottle. And two, I think for this one, where it's more of a traditional cocktail, I think all the character from the Reposado will be more interesting in this drink than just going with a sort of standard Blanco. 1/2 ounce of our Allspice Dram. This is awesome stuff. I love every cocktail I get to use it in. This is a local Allspice Dram from the other distillery here in DC, Cotton and Reed. So there's Thrasher's, which is down by the wharf, and then Cotton and Reed, which is up by like Union Station. Oh, and you can smell it already. That's just so cool. 1/2 ounce of our lemon juice. Gonna have to refill this soon. We are getting close on that. Then finally, for just a little touch of sweetness, a 1/4 ounce of our simple syrup. Obviously, the spirits that we're using in this are, they're spirits, but the Allspice Dram is a liqueur, so that'll bring some sweetness to this drink. So that's why we are so light with our sugar here. All right, I'm gonna shake that up. There we go. Sometimes when you hit your shaker to break it apart, it just ends up re-sticking itself in a different orientation. So you got to go back. But we're going to strain that into our coupe glass. Just barely too big to fit in a Nicanora glass. All right, And now this is our Texas Tiger. Let's give it a try. I've definitely, maybe I could have fit that into a, no, I think that's an appropriate wash line for this glass. Whew. Oh, wow, that's got some punch to it. Whew, okay. Interesting. Oh, you taste the reposado in there. That, ooh. Mmm. There's a lot of motion going on in this drink. Wow, okay, hold on. You definitely like the baking spice notes of the Allspice Dram. Those are definitely right up there, sort of, nice and strong and punchy. But they play in, like, they pick up a lot of that sort of like roasted character from the reposado tequila and do a really interesting kind of dance there. Ooh. And I think the bourbon too is lending like a little bit of its smokiness. There's a lot of these sort of like, I keep wanting to describe them as like dark notes because I think that's kind of like they're very associated with like the color brown in my brain. And let me go in a second time because that initial sip kind of just like splashed all over and I didn't really process it well. I feel like I need to take a more controlled look at this. It is certainly a strong drink, that is for sure. I might actually I probably needed to check my ratios. I might be a little bit off. I may have needed to do, I think that simple syrup might actually have to be bumped up to like a ½ ounce, just to help offset the sort of booziness of this drink a little bit. Because I mean, it is, I don't think Allspice Dram, that's not foolproof, is it? No, it's 24%. But it's still, it's a 2 ounce pour of spirit, and there's not a whole lot else in this drink to kind of counteract that. So it definitely is a very sort of booze forward drink, really kind of like bites the mouth with that initial mouthfeel of the alcohol. But it's a very pleasant blend of flavors there. And the lemon juice does add the lemon juice does an interesting thing, right? Where we've got, this sort of classic sour template, the booze, the sour, the sweet. But the lemon juice kind of like, it doesn't smooth things out the way that it normally would. It kind of adds an additional sharpness to the drink. I feel like there's something, I feel like I'm dancing around something here. I feel like there's a point to this drink that I'm trying to describe, and I just can't quite find the words for it. Yeah, it's got a harshness to it, but I don't know how to properly describe. I think honestly, the closest I can describe is in many ways, this drink kind of feels like it's doing this very weird thing in my brain where it feels like simultaneously, I've sort of got like it feels like taking Schrodinger's shot. Which is a very strange thing to say, and let me sort of explain what I'm picking up here. The harshness of the drink, combined with like the flavor profiles that we've got going on, it feels very much like having either of these spirits neat, right? Either the bourbon or our reposado tequila. It feels like having them neat, but because it's not, a shot of those, where I'm not sipping them neat. This is a cocktail. They kind of blend in and out. It kind of oscillates a little bit between that bourbon and that tequila, but it has the harshness of like drinking something neat. And so it really kind of like grabs the back of your throat with that. And it's this very strange kind of experience having this drink. And I think like the baking spice notes of the Allspice Dram kind of further blur that boundary that's going on there, where you can't tell, you're like, is this a flavor from the bourbon? Is this some notes coming off the tequila? Is it, completely unrelated and it's actually from the Allspice Dram? I think the best way I can describe this drink is that it tastes like all of its, components simultaneously, which kind of sounds like a no shit, right? Like, my brother in Christ, you put all the components in the drink and now you can taste them? Wow, no shit, Sherlock. But I guess what I'm trying to say is they don't blend at all. Like, these are components that should sort of blend to create more of like either, an evolution where you kind of progress through the notes, or create some new flavor, right? Where it's certain pieces of them. And instead you get this sort of weird third thing where it's kind of all the flavors simultaneously, but not as like new distinct combinations, just as all of them all at once, right? I think I'm gonna have to dig into the analogy bag for this. Perhaps the best way I can describe it is like, if you're listening to an orchestra play, right? There we go, okay, I've got it, right? You're listening to an orchestra play a piece, and they're all of these instruments are playing, at the same time, sometimes at different times, and it creates a song, right? You have, strings and brass, and sometimes they come in simultaneously to produce some new, song. Sometimes they come in one at a time and, sort of change throughout the song. This drink tastes like hearing the orchestra warm up, right? Where everybody is playing at the same time, but none of them are trying to like make a song together, right? They're all just kind of playing simultaneously. And so if you kind of focus in, you can kind of pick out like, oh, that's the flutes warming up right now. Oh, these are the cellos warming up. But it doesn't come together in any kind of like cohesive way, which is very strange because this feels like this drink should come together. Like, this is a very kind of standard spec for a drink. And somehow it just kind of refuses to really fuse into a final product. Yeah, a very strange experience. Ooh. And that's the other part of it, right? Is like because it's so boozy, it doesn't actually, like, the booze is on like a delayed timer where it doesn't actually hit you until kind of later on. Up front, it is more of that like lemon juice and, a little bit of the simple syrup, that sort of sweetness initially on the tip of your tongue. But then the booze really kind of just like grabs the back of your throat. It's a very weird drink. I think it does need more sweetness. I think more sweetness will help it come together. But all in all, just very strange. Not what I was expecting out of this drink. I thought this was going to be sort of like the safe drink of this week, just sort of straightforward, nothing crazy, but should be like a good solid drink to get started on Thursday. And it's not bad, but it does like this, strangely enough, this drink does kind of have the feel of like an amateur starting out, where it's just kind of like, I've got a couple of bottles, I'll just, throw them together. This is sort of like a basic spec, it'll work. And for some reason, it just doesn't come together in the way that I was hoping it would. All right, well, this drink may have not come together, but hopefully Detroit's offense can finally put it together. We'll find out in the simulation. The Lions start with the ball first, and this offense is firing on all cylinders, making it down to the edge of the red zone, where the offensive line opens up a chasm, and Jameer bursts right through for the 21-yard score. Dallas goes 3 and out, giving the ball right back to the Lions, who put together a long, sustained drive down to the 7-yard line. However, instead of continuing to ground and pound, Goff drops back to pass, pressure eventually breaks through, and he's sacked back to the 16. 4th and 11 is a bit long even for Dan Campbell, so Jake Bates is brought out to hit the chip shot, pushing their lead to 10. This time it's Dallas's turn to put together a long, sustained drive to the 7-yard line. With 1:30 left in the half, Dak hits Jake Ferguson right on the goal line for their first points of the game. However, a minute and a half with one timeout is more than enough time for Detroit to make it into Cowboy territory, with Jared Goff just throwing this ball away to stop the clock with 6 seconds left. From there, Jake Bates hits the 45-yarder, sending it right down Broadway to put the Lions up 13-7 at the half. After stalling the Cowboys' opening drive of the second half, Lions get the ball at their own 19, but not for long as Jahmyr Gibbs outruns his defender, cooks the free safety, and then leisurely strolls down the field to take this pass 81 yards for his second touchdown of the game. Trying for a clean 14-point lead, the Lions go for two, and Jameer simply outruns the unblocked D lineman, scooting in for the conversion. On this following drive, facing 3rd and long, Dallas answers right back as Amik Robertson whiffs on this tackle, leaving CD free to run all the way down the sideline for a 68-yard touchdown. The Lions get their star wideout involved in the following drive, as Goff finds Amon-Ra on the corner route, and he leaves his defender in the dust for the 25-yard score. Their defense might be cooked, but Dallas's offense is still fighting, facing a 3rd and 7 just across the 50. However, Jack Campbell picks off the check down intended for Williams before finally getting dragged down by Javonte at the 38-yard line. That eventually leads to a 1st and goal from the 2-yard line, where Madden finally decides to show Demo some love, dialing up a pitch play for his first touchdown of the game. With a 3-score lead, the Lions defense settles into soft zone, forcing Dallas to burn over 5 minutes on their next drive, though they do manage to cap it off with a touchdown to Jake Ferguson. The Cowboys attempt an onside kick in desperation, but Vaki effortlessly elevates to recover it. Instead of simply running out the clock, the Lions go to the air to try and pad their lead, but Goff's pass to Tesla is broken up on 3rd down. As a result, Jake Bates gets called out to hit one last field goal, extending the Lions' lead to 17 points. With 20 seconds left in the game, the Lions defense allows Dak to climb the pocket and fire a garbage-time 10-yard TD to CD. That brings up one final Aubrey onside kick, and this time it's J-Mo falling on the ball to secure possession. And with that, the Lions are finally able to kneel out the rest of the clock, securing their first victory over the Cowboys at Ford Field since 2013, 38-28. While I was certainly feeling more confident about this game before that Thanksgiving game, obviously this is going to be a very different matchup if Amon-Ra isn't healthy and ready to go. I definitely think it's going to be a boat race considering the defense gave up 31 to the Packers and the Cowboys just put up 31 on the Chiefs. All of that said, I'm willing to be hopeful and give my Lions a very tentative edge in this matchup. Dak definitely lit up our defense in this one, throwing for just over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, but that one interception was a big one, easily at least a 10-point swing. Jared Goff had a much more reserved performance, throwing the ball 11 fewer times, 22 fewer yards, only 2 touchdowns, but he did take care of the ball. Honestly, if Jared Goff is able to play point guard and just distribute the ball, let his playmakers do work after the catch, that bodes well for this Lions offense. As has been the case with most of the Lions wins recently, the real key to victory was Jahmyr Gibbs ripping off explosive runs, which he certainly did in this game. 14 carries for 110 yards and a touchdown, 2 runs of 20-plus yards. Really just moving the ball at will against this Cowboys defense, which is going to be key. On the other side of the ball, Detroit's defense was relatively good at keeping Javonte Williams to a quiet 49 yards, averaging less than 4 yards per carry. Oh, and also Demo finally got some love with that goal line touchdown. Considering the sheer volume of Dallas's pass attack, it's perhaps not surprising that the top 4 receivers in this game are Cowboys. Jake Ferguson and CD Lamb were both the primary engines of this Dallas offense, hauling in 7 passes and 2 touchdowns apiece. CD put up 125 yards and Ferguson came just shy with 76. Like I mentioned earlier, Amon-Ra is going to be critical to this matchup, as he posted 5 receptions for 93 yards and a touchdown. That said, he did get some help, as Sonic also contributed 4 catches for 107 yards and a receiving touchdown to go with his rushing touchdown. The bottom of the stat sheet looks pretty reasonable, and it's good to see Isaac Tesla getting involved with all the injuries to the Lions receiving core. Obviously, 2 catches for 31 yards isn't going to blow anybody away, but he's certainly shown the ability to step up and make a key play when this offense needs it. Now, Detroit's offense technically didn't have as good a day in the Monte Carlo simulation, but when you account for the fact that the sim typically skews on the defensive side, this is a really impressive showing. 256 passing yards might be the highest I've seen in a sim this season. It's generally a good day if your QB breaks 200 yards in here. And the ground game certainly didn't suffer from all this air yardage, as Jahmyr put up 80 and Monty managed 60 rushing yards. The Cowboys didn't have a bad offensive performance, but it just didn't have the same amount of juice as the Lions. Perhaps the most interesting thing is Javonte Williams and Malik Davis having a nearly perfect 50-50 split in terms of rushing production. You can see the effects of all of this offense in the distribution of scores from the Monte Carlo sim. It's a lot of touchdowns, as the most common outcome is a 28-21 Detroit victory. That specific score happened in over 4.5% of all simulations, which is a massive proportion for the Monte Carlo sim. However, averaging all 10,000 games actually tilts the margin even more in the Lions' favor, as it's Detroit 29, Dallas 19. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drink for this matchup is the pleasant but disorganized Texas Tiger. If you make it, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.